What it do, y'all? It's your girl Makeup and Travel, and for today's video I wanted to come on here and do a video that I saw on Butte Bean's channel. I will have her copy. I will have her video linked down below, but I wanted to rank all of my eyeshadow palettes. So these are the eyeshadow palettes that are currently in my collection, including my very latest palette, which is the Jackie Aina ABH palette. Now I am talking about any palette that has 3 or more shades. So these will have small palettes in there as well as my big palettes. I enjoy all of these palettes, do not get me wrong. If I did not enjoy them, if I did not like them, they would have already been decluttered. I did a really good declutter, I felt like, this past beginning of spring, and I will continue to effectively declutter products when I no longer want them. This last cluster of products will probably be the first category that I can start to really look at to see if any of these items can go, and probably starting next year some of these items will actually be going. But I just wanted to rank my products for you. If I rank your favorite eyeshadow palette lower than what you'd want it to be, I'm sorry, not sorry. This is my opinion. Let's get to it. So I have 64 eyeshadow palettes, and I am gonna of course be torturous and start from the bottom and work up to my number one product, or my number one palette. If you know me, know my channel at all, you will know what my number one palette is. You will probably know what my top 5 is, because it made complete sense when I got to those and I was like, oh, that's it. So my bottom palette that for me I just was not 100% into is my Sassy Sienna palette from Dose of Color. Now for me, the problem was that even when I used all of these shades, I didn't really see any depth. Now I can tell you quite honestly, I have not reached for this palette in the last year or so, and my makeup preferences and my makeup skill has drastically changed. So I will be giving some of these lower palettes some more love to see if I can get some more use out of them. I am happy that I added both the white and the black in this palette to give me some more depth and variety when using this palette. But overall, just the fact that it is no shimmers, but also that I felt the need to do that, I felt like this was good enough to be bottom. The next palette is one of its sisters, and it is the Marvelous Mauves palette. For me, this palette was slightly better in the fact that it was purples. If you know me, you know I really enjoy purples, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I did of course add 2 shades as well. Yeah, these are 2 palettes that I will hopefully be working with soon to see if I can get some more use out of them. And if I can't, I might as well just give them away because I don't need them sitting here when I'm not using them. Next are some more small palettes. Once again, this year I've just found that I do not reach for these small palettes, and I also don't reach for palettes that are all shimmer or all matte, which is why this bottom cluster is really what it is. And the first one is, or the next one is the Christina Lee Cosmetic quad. I can't remember what this quad's actual name is, but it has 4 very beautiful singles. But once again, these are all shimmers, and for me, I don't tend to do an all shimmer look. It's just not something that I do. So remembering to reach for this isn't always a first come response. And then right after it, I have my Autumn Vibes palette from them. I do enjoy this packaging and this format and this texture a lot better than the previous one. But once again, it's still the same problem where it's all metallics, and I just don't remember to reach for things like this. I just don't. Next is another palette that was just worrisome for me, and this is the Michelou Witchcraft palette. Now this was a palette that I was very excited about when I saw it, and I thought, ooh, I can get so many looks out of it. I heard so many people loving it and just raving about it. I wanted to try it. And as you can see, well, you probably can't tell, I have completely changed this palette. I have added shades from Igneous Cosmetics as all of the mattes and kept pretty much the rest of their shimmers. I did not enjoy their mattes at all. I got quite a bit of hard pan on all of the mattes, and I didn't enjoy them. So for me, this palette is down here because I had to basically maneuver to create a palette that was workable, which is not okay. Like, I shouldn't have to do that when I buy a palette. So for me, although I enjoy the color scheme and the arrangement of shadows that I have now, for me this is down in the bottom because I had to basically halfway make this palette, and that's not why I bought the palette. Juvia's Place Saharan is next. I enjoy this palette for what it is. It's very much a neutral with a pop of color Juvia's Place palette. I enjoy the formulation of both the mattes and the shimmers in this, but overall this is just not my color scheme. So for me to actually remember to reach for this palette, it comes few and far between in the amount of uses. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not a bad palette at all, but just I don't remember to reach for it because it's not my color scheme. Honey from ColourPop is next. This once again was a palette that I was extremely excited for. If you know me, you know I love yellows in every walk of my life, whether it's on my books, whether it is on my nails, whether it's in eyeshadow. I love yellow everywhere, okay? And I was very excited for ColourPop to come out with this palette, and then I got it. It had the glitter in the middle. There was not much depth for me to really just have unique looks. And yeah, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. As you can see, I have taken out the glitter and added a really dark brown from the Makeup Sheila palette, and I enjoy it better now. But once again, it's just one of those palettes that I feel like is a one-trick pony, and for that I could have just used the yellow singles that I had and the brown singles that I have. Juvia's Festival is next. And for me, once again, very nice pigmentation, very nice formulation, but overall this just looks like a random assortment of shades to me overall. I mean, I definitely am able to group shades together to create some interesting and fun looks, but it's just not a wholly cohesive palette. And so for me right now, that is challenging, and it's not as good right now. I don't know how to say it. Either way, this is its position. Then we have Makeup Addiction's Meadow palette. This is a brand that not many people talk about. It is a UK-based, Black-owned brand, and I really enjoy the formula. Very good formula, very good pigmentation. The metallics are nice and smooth. I don't think they're extreme metallic. For me, this palette is here just because I don't remember to reach for it. It's a good palette, don't get me wrong, but I just don't remember to reach for it. And so for me, I can't really wholeheartedly put it up at the top or even in the middle, because at least I reach for my middle ones. I don't reach for it. Another quad that is all shimmer is the Enchanted Secrets by Linda Hallberg. For me, this one is a little bit higher grade than the previous shimmer palettes that I showed, because this is like glittery topper beautifulness. So this is a different type of palette. This is purely meant to be a topper palette or a really nice glittery lid shade. So I get why I bought this, and I do enjoy reaching for it, and I have reached for this palette more often than I reached for my previous kind of one-hit wonder palettes. The Magic Palette by Juvia's. I, at this point, was just in a Juvia's kind of haze, and I was buying pretty much everything that they released. I do like that they combined both warm and cool tones, and I do like the formula in this palette, and I do like the shades in this palette, but I just don't reach for it. This will definitely have to be a palette that I really take the time to shop my stash and effectively think about using it again. But as of right now, it's down here in the bottom third. Then we have the Masquerade palette. This one beat out the Magic palette just because I felt like it was a little bit more cohesive. You get neutrals with a splash of color. I don't enjoy the formula out of all of the shades in these top 2 rows, but I really do enjoy that bottom row, and this is kind of what helped me not to get their completely neutral palette, which was, I believe, just the Saharan. I don't actually remember the name of that one, but I didn't buy it because I had that 2 groups of neutrals from Juvia's. Then we have Nabla Dreamy. I enjoy this palette. I enjoy the formula. I think overall I'm able to create a nice look with this palette, but once again, I feel like I can only create 1 or 2 looks with this palette. There's not much depth, so you really can't do much for somebody with my complexion. Really, Dogma is like the shade that needs to go in my crease, or it has to be Señorita that goes in my crease, and then I choose a lid shade. So for me, there's not much depth or variety in this palette, which is why it could not be any higher than where it is. I hear Nabla did a second version of this, which is darker, maybe for people my complexion. So maybe when I'm off my no buy, I will check that one out. Last in this bottom grouping, I have Lickin' Lashes Flamingo palette. And for me, this palette just did not live up to the hype that I created for it. I enjoyed their previous palette in this same format, and this palette just didn't do it for me. I feel like I didn't really give it too much of a chance. I think I might have given it 1 or 2 looks and then I was just like, meh. I will take the time to kind of give this palette a couple more shots, and if it still does not work up to where I want it to be, I'm just gonna go ahead and declutter it, because there's no need to keep palettes in my collection that I don't feel wholeheartedly love for. So that is the entire bottom grouping that I have. That grouping consisted of 14 different eyeshadow palettes, and now I'm just going to reach into my middle grouping, which will have 25 of the next palettes. All right, so starting with number 50, I have my Lime Crime Venus XL 2 palette. I really enjoy this palette. I think this palette is a diamond in the rough. I think not many people really gave this palette a chance. I loved the different varieties between pinks, purples, and greens, and some browns in here. The one thing about this palette is I just felt like it was very limited in what I was able to create, even with that variety, just because of the matte selection. The mattes weren't the best, and they gave you like 2 satiny shimmer shades that I think could have easily been switched to mattes and made this palette more diverse and more kind of able to create more looks. I can't think of the words, so yeah. Then we have the LA Splash Horror palette. This palette and me have a lot of memories, fond memories, because this was my first 3 looks 1 palette, and this was actually probably one of my first really big videos on YouTube, and I had so much fun with this palette. This is definitely a colorful rainbow palette. I don't reach for this often, but because the memories are so fun and I reach for it on a halfway consistent basis, I had to give it this spot. I really enjoyed this palette and I hope to use it more in the future. Then we have my Beauty Wide Seasons eyeshadow palette. This has been one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes for a very long time, and I was surprised when I put it so far down, but this truly is where it is right now. I haven't reached for this in a little while. I do still enjoy all of the colors. I still enjoy the formula, and I hope to reach for it soon. I was pretty close to hitting pan in this shade and a couple other of the shades. I just really enjoyed this palette overall. This was also one of my favorite shades. Beautiful, beautiful mustardy yellow. And yeah, I just enjoy the palette, but I don't reach for it as much as I used to anymore, and so it found its way down in the middle grouping. Next we have the Block Party palette. I really enjoyed this palette. I enjoyed the looks that I created with this palette. Had a fantastic time, but I don't really reach for this palette since. I still have so many fond memories. I still really want to reach for it, but I just haven't. And so it comes to a point where these types of palettes have to stay down in this middle or lower part of my grouping, because at the end of the day, although I enjoy them, although they bring me happiness, I'm not really checking for them. So Block Party from Suva Beauty. Then we have my Colored Raine Pressed Pigment Palette. Without a doubt, this is a beautiful formulation, beautiful kind of a rainbow-y type palette. The reason why this is in the bottom middle grouping is just because I don't reach for it. I don't reach for rainbow based palettes as much as I thought I would or want to. So this is why it's here. I really do enjoy this palette and I do want to get more use out of it. I actually might be doing a 3 looks 1 palette soon with this baby. But yeah, just trying to get more use out of these products, and hopefully thinking about the fact that I love this formula and I love this brand, and this palette is so far down in my ranking, I might want to get more use out of them, and maybe then my idea of this palette and my ranking will be a little bit more improved. Next I have the Nars Scandal palette. This was a limited edition palette, and I love this palette. I love the formula from Nars, and I love how simple this palette is. You get 3 mattes and 3 shimmers, and you can create at least 3 looks with this baby. I really enjoy this palette, and I feel like this is like the perfect summer holidays, like winter. Wow, I feel like this is the perfect like winter holidays palette, and I will probably be reaching for this around my birthday. Then we have the Dose of Color Desi and Kati palette, and this was a palette that I wasn't going to get because it had so many just neutral mattes, but the metallics in this palette are outstanding. So I really enjoy this palette, really want to get more use out of it, and that's pretty much it. Good palette. Dark mattes from Viseart. I really thought I was gonna get so much more use out of this palette than I do. I do reach for this every so often when I think, oh, I want a really grungy look, but I don't want subculture, so I reach for this. I really do enjoy this palette. I'm happy I got it. I got it secondhand, and it's still good. This macaroni shade is so pretty. Then we're bringing back a couple more of these small palettes. These are from Igneous Cosmetics, and this next one is Deep Blue. I really enjoyed the color scheme of this palette, but not all of the shimmers really were as good as they could have been, and because there's very few mattes, only 2, I had to put this one in this spot. Then next I put Cozy Cabin, because it had browns and purples. I really do enjoy this formula, but just the fact that there are browns in this palette, I felt like this was under the next Igneous Cosmetics 6-pan palette. And that next one is Lakeside, which my shade kind of crumbled, don't mind that, but this is a blue-green palette, and for, of course, obvious reasons, this is my #1 Igneous Cosmetics palette, and because all of these are so small, I honestly forget about them, which is why they're kind of in this middle pack of this middle group. Then we have the Palladio palette from Cleonid Cosmetics. For me, this palette is in this spot for a couple of reasons. There are only 2 mattes, so there's not a huge variety that I can really provide in the crease. And that's the biggest reason. I enjoy all the metallics. I think those shades are phenomenal, but just the fact that there's only 2 mattes was just a deal breaker, kind of, and yeah. Then I have the Caladiums Cosmetics VR Neon palette. For me, I enjoyed this palette, but it was not, in my opinion, worth as much hype as I felt everybody and their mother is giving this formulation. I'm still intrigued by the brand overall, but just it was okay. I enjoyed the metallics mostly. The mattes to me were a little sketchy and not the best, but the metallics were definitely, they were nice. But at the same time, I have nice metallics, so I don't need to buy more palettes to really feel that niceness. Chocolate Gold from Too Faced. This was a rager, okay? For Too Faced to really put as much impact in the beauty community as they did in a positive light with this palette was astounding, and the fact that I actually purchased it was astounding. I enjoy the basic shades. I was so close to hitting pan in that shade. That was like a Project Pan shade that I was working on, and I enjoy all the metallics. I don't reach for this on an everyday basis, of course, but I do enjoy this palette, and I think it's a really nice Too Faced chocolate bar palette, which is why I bought it. Then I have the Viseart Liaison palette. I enjoy this palette. I think that this palette has a lot of merit in being in my collection and just being created in general. But I have quite a few purple cool tone palettes, and although I enjoy this palette, it's not my favorite of them all. So this is why it kind of ended up in the middle. Then I have the Lucky Unicorn that came back again and again, which is Colored Raine's Queen of Hearts palette. Colored Raine's Queen of Heart palette. This palette was so inspirational to a lot of brands and just a lot of people in general. I have so many good fond memories of this palette, and because of the good formulation, the fond memories, and the color scheme, that is why this palette got to the position that it is. I don't reach for that palette very often, but when I do, I am always surprised and just how good the formulation is, and I question to myself why I haven't used it recently. Then I have, why is there so much crap falling on me? ABH Prism. This was a holiday release that a lot of people were like, what is these? But I enjoy it. I enjoy the funky combination of colors, and I think it's challenging in the ways that sometimes I want to be challenged, and when I don't want to be challenged, I don't reach for it. Then I have the Violet Voss Coral palette. This is a special palette to me because my best friend bought it for me, and it will always be a special palette to me. I really enjoy this palette, and I think I was able to create some really cool looks with it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I really do enjoy this palette, and I'm happy that it's in my collection. Then I have the Too Faced Gingerbread Spice palette. So this is a palette I just recently did a 3 looks 1 palette with, and I was able to create a nice variety, I felt like, with the overall style and the look of it, and it just reminded me how much I enjoyed both this formula and the palette overall, and I'm just very happy that I was able to pick this one up. Then we have the Bombshell Candylicious palette. This is the only Bombshell palette that I have kept. The other ones I have decluttered, and I really enjoy this palette. It is a huge palette, and I really enjoy certain shadows, certain shades. As you can see, I hit pan in this one, so that is why overall I've kept this palette, but I enjoy all of the formulas in this palette, and I would highly recommend it if you are interested. The only thing is it's just a mammoth. It's a mammoth, so be prepared. Then we have Makeup Addiction's Sinful Eyes palette. I feel like not many people even talked about this palette. I believe I did a 3 looks 1 palette and a review on this baby. I really enjoyed this palette. It had very fun textures. It had a really nice metallic-y foiled shades, really nice mattes, and I just really enjoyed this palette, which is why I was able to get so far up, but at the same time I don't find myself reaching for this on a halfway consistent basis, which is why it ended up in the middle grouping. Then we have the Saharan 2 by Juvia's. As you can see, a lot of my Juvia's Place palettes are down on these bottom 2 groupings. I enjoy this palette. I like the arrangement of mattes and metallics, and I think it's a really good pairing. I just don't reach for it often, but when I do, whoa baby, do I remember that I enjoy that palette. Then I have an X&O Cosmetics palette. This was my first and only palette from them currently, and I really enjoy this color scheme. I think this is a really fun color scheme. You have some purples, some pinks, and this really nice peachy orange shade. Really enjoy this palette, and it would be higher if I got more use out of it on a consistent basis. Then we have the Veena Collection Volume 3 palette. I did a 10 looks one palette with this baby. I loved it dearly and effectively, I felt like, and I just haven't reached for it since. I really want to because I've been craving these types of maroony shades, and it's causing me to think like I need to purchase a palette when I really don't. So I will want to reach in for this palette again, just to get some use out of those types of maroon colors, and hopefully kind of curb that interest. And then the last palette in this middle grouping is one that has been a favorite for a while, and I'm kind of surprised that it dropped down, but also not at the same time. And this is the Slayer palette by iSlay Cosmetics. And this dropped down just because I haven't been reaching for as many neon, really bright shades as this palette provides. And that's pretty much it. The formula is still good. I still enjoy the palette theoretically, but I haven't actually effectively been using it. Alrighty, so I'm now in the last 25 palettes, and this is the hardest section, of course, where I had to really differentiate between my favorite palettes in my collection. I had such a hard time, and honestly, if I did this on a different day, maybe if I did it after using one palette than the other, the organization would have been different. But as of right now, we're just going to work with this one. So my bottom 3 palettes in the top 25 palettes are actually all of my Pat McGraths. So the first one is the Pat McGrath La Vie en Rose, then the Dark Star, and then the Mothership 3. For me, these 3 are in the bottom 25 these 3 in the bottom top 25, not because of the quality, but because I do not use them. I love the color schemes, I love the quality, I love the different textures that are provided, especially in the Mothership 3, but the fact that I do not reach for these palettes is honestly highly annoying. And yeah, it's like you wasted your money. So yeah. Next I have Subculture. I really enjoy this color scheme, and because I enjoy the color scheme, I can deal with the formula. To me, the formula isn't terrible. It's honestly not the best, but it's not terrible. And as you can see, I've used this palette quite often, but I still haven't hit pan because I'm not digging my brush in there. Anyways, I really enjoy the palette. I actually should reach for this soon, seeing as we're getting into like the season that palette really works for. Next we have the Fall Fusion palette from Blush Tribe. This was a limited edition, but not only was it limited edition, I didn't enjoy all of the shades. This shade in particular I hate with a passion, and so this palette couldn't have been higher, although the color scheme and the formula on pretty much the other shades are beautiful. Just those 2 aspects had this be one of the lower palettes in this top 25. Then we have my Zuri Cosmetics palette. I love this palette. I don't know what happened with this brand. I feel like this was quite literally the only palette that they released, and then they like went out of business. I really enjoy the matte formula, the metallic formula. The color scheme that they provided in this palette was beautiful and outstanding. And I can't wait to get more use out of this palette. But just the fact that it's an all neutral palette, I just felt like I could not put this too high up on my ranking and like overreach some of my beautiful colorful palettes, but at the same time it definitely deserved to be in my top 25. Then we have the Tribe palette from Juvia's. This is not my favorite Juvia's Place palette, but I really do enjoy it. I think it's a really fun color combination, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Then we have my Pharaoh palette from Menagerie Cosmetics. Why does this palette look, I mean, knowing me, I did drop it, but anyways. This is a really fun palette, really pretty palette. I think I might actually go ahead and reach for this very soon and work with these spring tones because it is spring soon. But this is just not my favorite palette from them color scheme wise, so that's why it's not higher up on this list. Then we have my Modern Renaissance. This baby is busted and used, okay? I had this as a project pan for a year or so. As you can see, I was able to get pan in 3 of the shades. I wish I could get more, and maybe I will aim to do so. I have some dips in some of the other shades. I just never actually effectively hit the pan, but I really do enjoy this palette, and I think it is worth the purchase if you want to. Next, I have my Zulu palette from Juvia's Place, and this is just a really fun kind of rainbow-ish palette. I really enjoy this palette and still get quite a bit of use out of it when I think about a rainbow palette. The Hazina 2 palette from Blush Tribe is one of my favorite palettes from them, if not my favorite palette from them. And there's nothing much else to say. I really enjoy this palette. I love the combination of green, blue, and purple. And my favorite shadow in this is, of course, Raine. The Blue Moon palette from ColourPop is my, without a doubt, favorite ColourPop palette. I love this palette. I was able to create such a variety of looks, and just this was what I hoped my Honey palette was, but there was so much more variety in this palette. It was outstanding. Some of these blues are just so unique that I will refuse to get rid of this palette. I am so happy that I picked this one up, and yeah, it ain't going nowhere. Then I have my Paulina palette from Blush Tribe. This palette would have honestly been higher on the list if it was not limited edition. I enjoy this palette so much. This lime green shade really kicked off my lime green lust and urge. And just overall, I just really enjoy this color scheme. And it's nice. I will continue to use this palette even though Blush Tribe is going through some things right now. We have my Natasha Denona Purple Blue palette. I enjoy this palette mainly for the shimmers. I wish they were more matte, and that is honestly something that I want from Natasha Denona, more mattes. She clearly has come out with 2 or 3 all matte palettes. They just weren't my color scheme. A couple of her smaller panned big palettes have been catching my eye lately, so maybe I will pick 1 or 2 of those up. But as of right now, that's my one critique about this palette and why it was not higher. Then I have a palette I can't wait to reach for in the very near future, and this is my Dragon Child palette from Menagerie Cosmetics. I know when this released, a lot of people were like, what is this color combination? Do you know what the color wheel is? But I find that this has actually been a very cool color scheme, and it actually reminds me a lot of Melt Cosmetics, the Skull palette. Whatever the dark side is, this palette reminds me a lot about it, and since I don't have that baby in my collection, we finna use this. Next, I have my Nomad Cosmetics Harajuku palette. I really enjoy this palette immensely. You have a matte row, a satin row, and a beautiful metallic foily glittery row. The only reason that this palette is so far down is just for the fact that this satin row is here. I am not a huge fan of satins, and because of that, it kind of just brings down my overall enjoyment quality of this palette, but it's still a very good palette, and I would still highly recommend it. Then I have my Menagerie Violet Ink palette. This is the only mini palette that I got. I didn't get the other one, and apparently that one has been discontinued, so I probably will not be able to, but I really enjoyed this one. Still do, and as you can see, I have a nice little bit of pan in this palette. The Lunar Beauty Strawberry Dreams palette. Oh, love this palette. The only reason that this palette is so far down is because these two blue shades I did not enjoy. I didn't think they worked really well, and because of that it just brought the whole quality of this palette down. But overall, this puppy is a diamond. Then we have my Foiled Rose palette from Love Luxe Beauty. I love this palette. You're not going to get much variety in this palette at all, but I'm telling you, this palette just makes me forget that. I keep forgetting that it's so limited because it's so good in my opinion. There are only 3 mattes, and honestly these are the only 2 mattes that'll show up. This one is basically useless for me, but these metallics are just stupid. They're stupid how good they are, and that's really what brought this palette up to the ranking that it currently is. Then we have my new palette, which is my Jackie Aina palette. I didn't want to put this too high up because it is a new palette, so I felt like my opinions on it might be a little swayed, but that being said, I still very much enjoy this palette, and that's why this palette is up here in the top ranking. If you're wondering, this is actually the palette that is currently on my eyeballs. So alrighty guys, we're in the top 5 eyeshadow palettes from my collection. Can we stay together? Alrighty. I list down below if you can guess what my top 5 are based on what I've already shown you and what you know about me. I would love to see if any of you guys get it right. And after I stop scratching, I will show you guys these palettes. So at number 5 we have Nomad Cosmetics Lago di Como palette. This is my favorite Nomad Cosmetics palette just because of the color scheme. This top row is deceiving. This one is like a nice subtle mustard. This one is actually a duochrome, and this is like a beige color. Then you have your row of greeny blues and then your true blues. I just really enjoy this palette, and I hope that they come out with some more 9 pans. I've noticed that they've come out with a couple of quads that have been all metallics. I wish that they would stick with these 9 pan palettes, and then I would get some more of them. Then I have another blue-green palette, and this is Menagerie Cosmetics Whale Song palette. I can't help but say that this is a color scheme that I was not mad that was going around to every brand under the sun, because I very much enjoyed it and took advantage of it. So this is my Menagerie Cosmetics Whale Song palette. I love it. These greens and these blues are very unique in some cases, and I just can't help myself. Number 3, I'm still surprised that this made it this high up, but it did. And this is my Huda Beauty Nude palette. I just really enjoy this palette. I hate the glitters. Oh my god. Take out the glitters, but after that I just really enjoy this palette. I enjoy the mattes. I even didn't hate the concealer shade, and I enjoy these like flecky metallic shades. Overall, this palette even gave me more variety than I was expecting. I didn't think I would be able to get together with the variety of looks that I was able to do, and I'm just happy. I'm happy to have this palette. So that is that. The second palette overall in my collection is of course my Lunar Beauty Moon Spell palette. I love this palette. I believe I did 5 looks for this palette, and it's just a beauty. It's a beauty. This is a deceiving brown. It's a brown with a very yellow undertone. I love this like lime green and a whole row of purples. Sold. So overall, I just really enjoyed this palette, and the packaging is nothing short of amazing. And then at number 1 we have my Lick and Lash Playful palette. I know you guys knew this was gonna be here. I couldn't not put my Lick and Lash Playful palette here. Like, I really couldn't. I'm still astonished by the fact that there is no pan in this palette, because I use this palette a very frequent amount. If I want a rainbow look, or if I'm thinking of a particular color, I always look at this palette to see if it has it. These 2 shades right here, I can't believe they don't have pan. Those are the 2 shades that I dip in the most in this palette. I just really enjoy this baby, and will continue to enjoy it and get my money's worth. So that's my ranking video. That is ranking all of my eyeshadow palettes from number 64 to number 1. I would love to hear what you guys thought about my ranking. If you would have put one palette higher than the other, lower than the other, if you thought my rankings were good, if you thought my explanations were good, because I feel like I talked for a year and a day. And yeah, I will see you guys